What's going on, you guys? So yesterday I watched the Cigar Talk with Najee, and they interviewed Shakur Stevenson, and he's been making a little bit of headlines because of the comment he said about Sugar Ray Robinson not being in his top five, and comparing him to modern day guys like Terrence Crawford. And he wasn't just Sugar Ray Robinson he spoke about. I think he spoke about Sugar Ray Leonard and stuff like that too. But I wanted to focus on the Sugar Ray Robinson comment, not being in his all-time best pound for pound five fighters of all time. And some of the stuff he said, like if you're looking at it, and comparing it to modern day boxing, like, yeah, he always kept his hands low. For his time though, you got to keep in mind, like, Sugar Ray Robinson was by far the most skilled fighter in boxing when he was fighting, and he was levels above whoever he fought. And then how often he was fighting as well, right? He got a crazy record of like 170 something 70 something wins. He had like 20 losses, but in his prime, he was pretty much untouchable in that era, right? Now, one thing that he said was keeping his hands low. Fighting, in general, boxing in that time is completely different to what it is now. I mean, you date back as far as the early 1900s, all the way up until, I guess, like you could say around Ali and stuff. A lot of those guys, they did keep their hands low. And the reasoning for that was those gloves they were using. A lot of fighters were prone to hand injuries because they're pretty much using leather oven mitts for boxing gloves. I mean, those things had like no padding. It's like fighting barefisted. Or they looked like just leather yard work gloves. I mean, they weren't padded at all. And the reasoning for keeping them so low, and you see the typical old school boxing stance where they got their left hand pointing upward and the right hand downward. The reasoning for that was it was a lot more body shots back in the day because fighters were worried of breaking their hands when hitting the opponent in the head. So, I mean, at that time, certain fighters were doing that because that was the norm, right? Now, I do think when talking about Terrence Crawford, I think Terrence Crawford can fight in any generation, any era, and he's going to be great. I mean, looking at it, yeah, I would pick him over Sugar Ray Robinson, especially at welterweight. I don't think really too many guys can really beat Crawford, in my opinion, at welterweight throughout the history of the sport of boxing. I mean, there's definitely some guys up there like Sugar Ray Leonard, Mayweather, Tommy Hearns. I think those are the three that would probably give him his toughest fight throughout the course of boxing, right? But it makes you have a different perspective when you realize certain things that were different back then, right? Like I said, the gloves. Now, you try to throw in some of the modern day fighters that have certain hand injuries, like a Shakur Stevenson, a Floyd Mayweather. How would they fare in those eras, the early 1900s to even Sugar Ray Robinson times? I mean, these guys right now are prone to hand injuries like no other, and then throw in the Philly shell defense too. I mean, keep in mind, Mayweather is a defensive wizard, so is Shakur Stevenson. Both of those guys are prone to hand injuries, and a lot of, their defense, is slipping and dodging punches, but a lot of it is catching the shots. How many shots are you actually going to catch before your hands break and you're wearing little oven mitts for gloves? You're not going to be able to roll, and catch some of those punches. It's going to hurt your hands, and they're eventually going to land. So I guess if you're looking at it, and comparing these old-time fighters to modern-day guys, then I agree with Shakur Stevenson. I think Terrence Crawford would destroy a Sugar Ray Robinson. And I still think he'd beat him even in his era with those gloves and all those circumstances that they were fighting in, right? 15 rounds or 45 rounds, some of those old guys, Jack Dempsey fought in the middle of the summer in New Mexico in 103-degree weather, 45 rounds, some crazy stuff like that. I mean, those guys, obviously, in those days were great fighters, and they're always going to be remembered as great fighters. They're legends in the sport, right? There's a reason we still talk about them today, and it's, close to 100 years ago when they were fighting. But all in all, man, respect to both Sugar Ray Robinson, Terrence Crawford, Shakur Stevenson. I think they're all great fighters. But we just got to accept them in the eras that they were in. when you start comparing them to, the fighters of today, I would think like modern day middleweights would probably be a Jack Dempsey, Jack Johnson, with circumstances to this generation. You throw them in that generation, it might be a little different. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think Shakur Stevenson's, got a point? Do you think it's just a battle of the eras? If you were to throw modern day fighters into that era, how would they fare? And if you throw the old time fighters in the modern day, how would they fare? Let me know what you guys think. Hate, like, comment, subscribe.